right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning into the Sports Card Therapist, where I give you a behind the scenes look at my hobby hustle and sprinkling some self care and wellness on top of that. I'm Rob Gerard, your Sports Card Therapist. And whether if you're listening to me on iTunes, Spotify, or watching on YouTube, welcome to the podcast. And I hope that you have been enjoying these roundtables that I've been giving you for the last couple of weeks. We still have 2 more weeks of roundtables to go, but here's a big one for you guys. Here's a big one. This is one that I've been looking forward to. This is called Polarizing Figures. And I have on with me the only Geoff Wilson, sports card investor, and Dan, the great curator. Geoff, Dan, how you doing?
Great, Rob. It's good to be on with you. This is fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Thanks for having us, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so I figured you guys would be like a good combination because, Geoff, I know that you were supposed to come on my show last year. Some things happened. It didn't work out. Dan, I've had Dan on my show a couple times, and you guys have actually linked up and you guys do some work together. So, I figured what better time to bring you on, Geoff, you on, Dan, for the roundtable session. These roundtables have been incredible. Streams have been through the roof. So I figured it would be a great time to do it. And yeah, so just talk to me a little bit about, first of all, Geoff, the stuff behind you. What's going on here? I'm seeing Coke bottles. I'm seeing full Coke bottles, by the way. I'm seeing footballs. I'm seeing memorabilia. Talk to me about what's going on there.
This is actually one of the original Sports Card Investor sets. I'm in my home, and I've got a little recording studio in my home. We don't really use it ever anymore because we've got an actual studio where we do all the recording. My whole team comes in the studio. We got a bunch of sets in the studio. But yeah, this is a combination of some personal things like signed footballs and little Florida Gator stuff. Like those Coke bottles are 1984 SEC champion Florida Gators next to a Tim Tebow signed football, next to a Danny Werfel signed football. And then also a lot of sealed wax through the years. So I've got boxes of Select from every single year Select was made. I've got a bunch of 2012 sealed wax because that stuff's not a lot of it out there. I've actually got, I think it's below the camera, but I got like Topps Chrome going back to 1996, the first year of Topps Chrome. So just a little collection of stuff behind me that I like to look at from time to time.
Nice. And it does feel like the card hobby and the memorabilia hobby, for as long as I could remember, has really been separate. But it does feel like things have been starting to bleed over into each other over the last couple of years. I don't know if you guys feel that or not, but
yeah, I'd say very much so. And I think, I think part of it's been driven by the fact that Panini has stopped using game used, and in some cases player used, patches, player worn, I should say, or game worn in their products. And so I think people are like, well, wait a minute, you can go buy game worn jerseys of prominent players for not that much money. Well, real prominent players. You've seen the prices go crazy now for like LeBron jerseys and Steph Curry jerseys and that type of thing, but they didn't used to be that much. And especially secondary players are still not that much. And so I think people are looking at that and they're seeing like, well, I love the card with the patch, but the patch isn't even game worn. So maybe I can go buy a game worn jersey. And so I think you're seeing a little more crossover. And as people get more into vintage too, I think that people start to recognize that there's vintage artifacts beyond the cards. There's uniforms and game used bats and game used gloves and signed baseballs and this whole world, type 1 photos, this whole world of collecting that exists beyond cards. And a lot of it is even more rare. Tickets, a lot of that stuff is even more rare than cards. And it's real cool to see the growth in that. I've actually gotten a bit into it myself and am really enjoying it.
Yeah. And if I can add to that too, I think the auction houses are pushing this too. And that helps a lot too, because for so many years, for me as a collector, I would stay away from memorabilia because there was no way to like really trust where it came from, things like that. But now there's a good vetting process for a lot of these auction houses, and you feel a little bit more comfortable kind of getting in there when there is like PSA authentication or there's a letter of provenance attached to it or a story that can be told and things like that. So that makes it very interesting.
Yeah, and without a doubt, both of you guys and Geoff, I like how you bring up the type 1 photos because, man, I was bidding on a type 1 photo last week at the PWCC Premier auction and missed out on it. Went a bit higher than I had anticipated, and I guess I could talk about it now. I was so reluctant to talk about it. I didn't get it, but so I have the 48 mic in. I have the 48 mic in, and they were selling a Type 1 of the photo match of this. I don't know if you guys saw that, but
I heard about
man, I had my eye. I was laser beamed on that thing, and when I didn't win it, I just went on a heartbroken spending spree for like the following week on just random
rage buying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It was totally buying with my emotions. So
Yeah,
Dan,
that stuff's cool. Like in Type 1 photos, a lot of the older ones like that are really rare. And the crazy thing is those photos, 5 years ago, I could have been had for pennies on the dollar. I mean, even more extreme than cards. I mean, there was, you could have bought Type 1 photos for $50 or $100. That would be $10,000 today. But no one really knew that much about it or was that into it. At least I'm sure some people were, but it didn't have the widespread attention that it's starting to get now.
yeah. And I don't know exactly what that reason is for. It does seem like, every dog kind of has his day in the sun, like in this hobby. At one point it was, WWE Prism, and then it kind of moved on to Marvel, then it moved on to Disney, and it moved on to all these other things. So, but it does feel like low key Type 1 photos have been bubbling up for the last year or two. I don't know if it's
Oh, look
because
at that.
oh yeah, you got the
Daniel's
Hulkster one. Oh yeah. Oh,
that's awesome.
that hits me in the feels right there. And Dan, I know because my buddy Tony from Cousins Collectibles, he's after a Mike Tyson Type 1 photo, and he told me that you have one on eBay posted, but it's like him like in a chef's hat, like doing like the chef's kiss.
Yeah,
and
I can pull it for you if you want to see it real quick.
Listen, go for it, man. Go for it.
I mean, the other cool thing about Type 1 photos is they're also only from a period of time, right? Like you're not seeing Type 1 photos today with digital technology and all that kind of stuff, but you've got a very finite period of time that Type 1 photos existed.
Yeah.
That's cool.
People don't know this is one of the skills that Mike Tyson learned in prison, to be a culinary chef. No, I'm just kidding. It's from a charity event.
Yeah. So my buddy Tony said, he goes, listen, if I'm going to buy a Type 1, I said, you should make an offer, hit up Dan. He goes, listen, if I'm going to get a Mike Tyson Type 1 photo for my collection, it's going to be a bit more menacing than him in a chef's hat. So yeah, absolutely. So guys, to kind of move along, I'm curious, talk to me about your roots in the hobby. Talk to me about first time you could remember, whether if it was buying cards or getting memorabilia or doing some reading, and when was the first time that you really got the bug that you could remember?
Well, for me, it was a kid. In fact, my first job ever was at a sports card store in Sarasota, Florida, when I was 14 years old. So, I mean, I was a huge into it, buying and selling and going to card shows and everything like that, like the whole time that I was growing up. And like many people, I lost touch with it for many, many years. And I got back into it in 2018 when my older son went to go visit my mom, his grandmother, and she bought him a pack of football cards. They were at Target, and they had football cards by the checkout, and she bought him a pack of football cards and said, your dad used to be really into this when he was your age. I hadn't seen or touched a sports card in 25 years. And he comes back to Atlanta and he shows me the cards. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like frankly, I didn't even know they made football cards anymore. We opened the pack together. All the nostalgia comes back around. And that's honestly what started the journey. Like that happened. I pulled my collection out. I'm going through my collection for the first time because I kept it all from when I was a kid. I still had it. It was all sealed up, but I had not opened those boxes since I was a teenager. And so I brought them all out and, went through them again. Then I started like researching it. And then I was like instantly struck by two things. First of all, how much growth potential I felt the hobby had. This is back in 2018. But then second of all, how unsophisticated I felt the hobby was in terms of content and in terms of data and analytics. That's what struck me. And I said, this thing is going to get really popular and there's massive opportunity here to create great content and to provide the world with better data and analytics that are currently there. And it would enhance the hobby experience for everybody. And so that's what I set out to do.
So you're saying that before the pandemic, so we're going back about 18 to 24 months before the pandemic, you had this vision of the hobby just being like wide open and saying, you know what, like this is hitting me in the feels right now, going through my old stuff. I could absolutely see there being growth in this hobby, and I have a vision for what I want to do in it.
Oh, 100%. I thought this thing was going to blow up huge, just like it did. And my reasons for that were how much different many aspects of the hobby were today when I got back into it in 2018 than when I was a kid. You had the actual ability to buy and sell anytime you wanted in these online marketplaces. So you had liquidity, you had social media, so you could share your collection and connect with fellow collectors, right? You had grading, so you could assure the quality of what you were buying and understand it even through a remote purchase, type situation. And then a million other things. Lots of accessible marketplaces and, the national, which had grown, all these different things. And so for all of these reasons, I said, I really think this is going to blow up again. I started telling my friends about it in late 2018. My friends were like, what are you talking about? Baseball cards, why is this the thing? And then I think it was in March or April of 2019 when Gary Vaynerchuk went on the Rich Eisen show, and he did an interview, and that was the first time Gary V ever came out publicly and started talking about sports cards. And Gary V went on the Rich Eisen show and said, I predict sports cards are going to boom and explode again. Well, that thing aired, and within probably 10 minutes of it airing, I had like 3 or 4 of my friends texting me links to it saying, oh my God, Gary V is like saying a lot of the same things that you've been telling us annoyingly for the last few months. And I'm like, yes, this is it. Like, he sees it, Gary sees it. This was validation to me. So it was actually as soon as Gary did that I said, okay, I got to hop in and start doing stuff. And so, I launched Sports Card Investor as a YouTube channel in July of 2019. And the very first video I did and it's still live today, back in July 2019, is why I believe that the hobby is about to explode in popularity. And I went through all the reasons why I thought that was going to happen. I think it was actually my third video ever where I did the Will Greer, Kyler Murray thing. So I had the right idea.
Wait, I'm not familiar with that.
The hobby. I picked the wrong guy. I picked the wrong quarterback to back at that moment in time, but I had the right idea on the hobby.
Wow. Yeah. And that video has just not died down. It feels like, it's
People
just
love that.
But one thing that I thought was actually like likable, like made you even more likable, was the fact that was it your Christmas video that you did? You did, was it the New Year's or the Christmas video? Maybe. I forget, but basically where you just took ownership of it, the one where you were rapping.
Oh yeah, April Fools. That was, I think,
April Fools.
This year. Yeah.
Listen, that was.
Look, no one gets it right all the time. I mean, you watch sportscasters, on TV with these prediction shows, and I mean, they get it right half the time at best, right? And like, I'm certainly not perfect. I made a ton of bad calls and mistakes through the years. I'm human. I did that. It was obviously that was the wrong call. What's ironic, I will say this, my team pepped me up recently. This is such a silly factoid, but if you go back to 2019 when I did that video, and if you look at the price of Will Greer's cards versus Kyler Murray's cards on that date, and if you look at the price of their cards today, you actually would have done better buying Will Greer cards because of the fact, now that they've both lost money, but because of the fact that Kyler Murray's cards were so elevated because he was the number 1 pick and, all this kind of stuff. And, his cards have come down so much because the Cardinals were disappointing this year or whatever. Will Greer's cards were cheap to begin with, and they're even cheaper today. But like from a percentage standpoint, it's not quite as bad. So I'm like, look at that. See, I was just trying to save everybody money with that card pick. But no, clearly that was a whiff. But you know what? It was those early days were fun because I was trying to really dive into analytics and understand, based upon all these advanced analytical methods, what players maybe had a chance. And in that case, I was using data from ESPN's 538, where they looked at all these advanced statistics of these guys in college. Neither of them had stepped onto the pro field yet. And their article made the case that Will Greer had close to as much likelihood chance of succeeding in the pros as Kyler Murray did. So then I overlaid this to their card prices and I did a formula. And I'm like, well, you're better off buying Will Grier because he's actually got a 70% chance of succeeding, but his cards are here. Whereas, or, 50% chance of succeeding, whereas cards are here. Whereas Kyler Murray was like a 70% chance of succeeding, but his cards are like way up there. And so that's why, that's why I made the pick that I did.
So eat your own words, Watchdogs. Will Grier would have been a better investment. I love it. I love it. So Dan, do you remember what your thoughts were going into the idea of deciding, like, you know what, I think I'm going to start making content. I think this feels like, because let me say, Dan, your content, as for as flack as you get, and I realize that you absolutely lean into, the negativity that's thrown upon you, and but like, you're really good and super entertaining. It's hilarious, like laugh out loud kind of funny. So what were your thoughts before really going into the whole content space?
Well, when I got back into collecting myself, I was just like everybody else. I was getting back in and I was playing the game of trying to flip cards and invest and buy things. And I learned quickly that you had to have like a social media presence when you got back in the hobby. You had to have an Instagram, a handle, and that's how you would interact with it or engage with a lot of people in the hobby. So I created that, and in order to expand my following, I had to create content that people would like and choose to follow me so that I could gain that exposure. So I started doing that. And then towards that time, for a period of time, the hobby was good. And then we went into that downturn where people started to panic and things like that. And before I got back into the hobby, I studied investment strategies in different markets, like real estate, stocks, and things like that. That's kind of like where I come from. So I felt like I needed to kind of share information that I had with other people in the hobby who were not experienced to market downturns. And I started like doing these Instagram posts where I would write out these long paragraphs and I put them there, and I got great feedback from that. And from that feedback, some of my friends encouraged me to make videos from that, to translate it, because they didn't want to read these long paragraphs. They wanted more digestible content. So I started making these videos, and that's kind of when I parodied Geoff's intro just as a joke, because I didn't know what to do at that time. So I was watching a lot of Geoff's early informational videos, and I just kind of like, I wanted to emulate that, Geoff, I wanted to be on that same level. So I did a parody of it with no bad intentions at all. It was just made to basically pay homage to Sports Card Investor at that time. And I started making informational videos. And at first I tried to be very professional, because that's my background. I'm professional. And I tried to be very professional with my content. And after a while, I just like, it felt like a job, it felt like I was trying, I wasn't having fun doing it. So I started to kind of let loose a little bit and show a little bit more of my personality. And I started to make Instagram reels and other posts that were not necessarily information focused. And that got great feedback. And from that feedback, I got comfortable in my own skin within the hobby, where I could really let people see my personality. And since then, my content has really evolved from, being strictly informational to being almost entirely entertainment based now. I would say that probably like 90% of my content is designed just to entertain people for a few seconds a day. And then maybe 10% gives them a little bit of information that might help them on their hobby journey. So that's kind of like how it happened.
Yeah. And so, I think if there's new people getting in, and a lot of times I think what might rub people the wrong way is when they think new people entering hobby, people immediately go to kids, right? They immediately go to kids. And with the kind of presence that you guys have, especially you, Geoff, right, with your subscriber count on YouTube. I mean, you type in sports cards, you're one of the first people to pop up. You make really well produced videos, and talk to me about hobby accountability with some of the things that you do, some of the things that you say, some of the content that you present, because I think some of the flack that you've gotten specifically, Geoff, is that you've made the hobby more about the money and the transaction, whereas the pure hobbyists feel like it should always come down to the cards. It should always be about the cards. And when the first people, when their first new people, when their first introduction is money, investment, that people think that that might not be the long-term approach. That's not how you keep people long-term, because as soon as they get burned by investments, they're going to leave the hobby.
Look, I think that's fair. I think that's a very fair viewpoint, and I understand why people have that. There's a lot of collectors that I think, were upset from kind of the beginning with this standpoint on money. And I think a lot of it also came down to the fact that there were a lot of people that flooded in and were playing the flipping game and were buying and selling and looking at dollars all the time. And it drove the price of everything way up. And you've got these collectors who've been part of the hobby for 10 or 15 or 20 years. And they used to be able to go buy their Prism hobby boxes every year for $200. And then all of a sudden the Prism hobby boxes are like $1,500. And they're like, what the heck is going on? And why is this happening? And I take some responsibility for that. Absolutely. Because I was reporting on the dollars and cents. And I don't think I was necessarily, I didn't create that. There was definitely a group of people that already had that mindset. That's why I got so many subscribers, but I fueled it. I have no doubt that I fueled it. And I have a couple thoughts on that, right? So, I mean, back in 2019 and 2020, when we were focused on doing a lot of that type of content, because that was primarily all of the content that we were doing in 2019 and 2020, it was also very profitable for people. And there were a lot of people that were having really good experiences flipping cards, and people were making a lot of money. And it was a time when you had a lot of people who were doing that as their form of entertainment during COVID, and the rush of buying a great card and then flipping it. There was a lot of people that were really into it for that reason. And our content certainly catered towards those people. When the world started to open back up and we had the ability to start to go out into the world again in early 2021, and when the sports card market started to cool off a little bit, we drastically changed our content. And our content today is much more collector focused. People keep bringing up these videos of like, oh, I said, buy Ben Simmons, or I said buy Will Greer, or whatever. We were doing card picks for a while. People criticized me. They said you used to do a card pick of the week and that kind of thing. That's true. We stopped it in October of 2020. We stopped that in October of 2020. And the reason why I stopped it was because I saw behavior from my audience, which was when we put a card pick out and we said, buy this person, we would see that the market on that player would suddenly shoot up overnight. And I started to get worried about that. And I started to say, I don't love that. It feels like this could be seen as market manipulation.
So you were shifting the market.
It was
knowingly or unknowingly, right?
Happening in 2020. It was definitely happening in 2020.
Wow.
When we put out a card pick, you would see the summer of 2020, fall of 2020, without a doubt, a card pick would go out. People would buy the card. We do a video highlighting a certain card. People would buy the card. We would see it. The market would rise immediately because people would start going on eBay and try to snatch the card up. We got worried about that because that's not actually what we ever really intended for people to do. We wanted to provide education. We wanted for people to do research and make their own decisions. We wanted to provide our suggestions, our take on things, why we're doing what we're doing, but we didn't want it to turn into just, follow the leader. And so we stopped that in October 2020 when things were still hot and it was still working. Like, we could have continued to do that for months after that, and people would have had a good experience, as they had through all of 2020, because of the fact that you could pretty much say any card and chances were it was going to go up in the next month, right? Based on how things were back then. But we stopped that in October of 2020, and we continued to do some videos with recommendations of like who to buy and sell and that kind of stuff. But we killed all of that in 2021. Like, we stopped all of that stuff. The only thing we've done since 2021 is we do our are like top 5 hottest cards of the week, which is simply reporting on what's happening in the market. These are not cards that we recommend. These are not cards that we suggest. In fact, in many of the videos I say, guys, I'm telling you what's hot in the market, but this is often not the right time to buy these cards. Many of these cards are going to go down in the upcoming weeks. We make a very clear point of trying to educate the customers on that, but people want to see what cards are hot because there are still people that love that aspect of it. And I still love that aspect of it. Like I am both a collector and an investor, as well as a speculator / flipper, if you want to put that into a different category. I prefer to think of that as short-term investing. Some people take, issue with that word, but I'm all of those things. And I love all of those things. I've got an amazing collection that I've built up over the last 5 years that I absolutely love. And that I'm going to hold on to forever. I've got a whole bunch of cards that are cards that I would never even recommend from an investment. I got probably the biggest Tim Tebow collection in the world. And I'm never going to say Tim Tebow is a good investment, but I love those cards, right? At the same time, there's cards that I buy specifically because I think that they're good investments. And then there's other cards that I buy because I think that guy's going to get hot in the fall. And I want to buy the card because I think I'll be able to flip it for more money. I don't think anything's wrong with any of it. I do think that it is best for the hobby, though, to have people that are in it for more than just the money. I don't like people who are just showing up specifically for the flip. And you had a lot of that in 2020, 2021. I prefer people who appreciate the cards, who appreciate collecting. And if you do, and you're going to do some flipping along the way, in my opinion, that's great.
Can I add something to that, Rob? That's, I think Geoff's spot on with everything from his perspective there. And I think that anybody that makes content or anybody that has any type of following in the hobby has to have a certain level of accountability for the information that they put out there. But there is a distinction that has to be recognized between people who make content that says, this is the card that you should buy if you want to make, X amount of money on it. And people that just post cards from their collection, newly acquired cards, or posting things that they're interested in, right? I think that currently the narrative that's being pushed by a lot of these people that call themselves hobby watchdogs is that there should be no self-accountability at all. And that if somebody sees something on YouTube or Instagram, then that's just like an automatic pass to go maybe buy that card with the intention of making money. If it doesn't work out for whatever reason, they're not self-accountable for that action. They're blaming the content creator who they watched for 30 seconds talk about it, something like that. And that's dangerous because that just basically takes that accountability away, where people can just act recklessly. And if it doesn't work out, then they'll lash out and blame people rather than learning from their mistakes or things like that. And I'll give this example outside of the market, right? Before I spent a lot of money on cards, I used to buy stocks. I used to invest in a lot of stocks, and I would watch a show, called Mad Money. It's Jim Cramer. He talks about stocks, and he gave me picks, and sometimes I bought those picks and they didn't work out, but I don't go and blame him for that. I don't make videos blaming him for that. I learned from my mistake and I learned not to do it anymore. And I think that we have to take that example and teach a lot of people in the hobby that you can't point fingers at people first. You have to look at your own decisions and evaluate the type of content that you consume and how you interpret that content before you start pointing fingers at people for giving misinformation.
Yeah. And good points by both of you guys. I think as human beings, I'll speak for myself. I'm easily influenced. I'm my own man. I'm married. I own a home. I have a career, all that stuff. But I realize that the content I consume is swaying my buying decisions. I could think back a couple of years ago, I would be listening to podcasts. Yeah, I mean, just like every day, I'm listening to podcasts every day. I'm consuming a ton of hobby content every day, and I think now I'm a little bit more aware of what I'm doing, and I try to curate the content that I consume. That's a bit more curated, but we're easily influenced. And I'm kind of curious, Dan, for you. So you always talk about pump what you like. I think about if Jeff Wilson ever said the phrase pump what you like this it would be like the hobby world would just explode, right? So Dan, talk to me about pump what you like and why like even after you've gotten so much heat for it, you've leaned into it and continued to pump what you like, because the term pump, when it comes to buying any sort of sports card, stock, anything like that, is the ultimate taboo.
Yeah, I started doing that because I noticed that people were throwing that word around a lot, even when it didn't really apply to a lot of situations that they were using it for. And I felt like they almost like misappropriated that word from other markets like crypto, stocks, things like that, where it's possible to manipulate markets in terms of buying up a lot of stock, you know, talking about it, getting the price to rise, then selling it off and taking the price. But collectibles, I think, work way different than that. I don't know, there are some people that stack certain cards, but like you can't have a number of cards where you can really impact the market in that way, I think. For me personally, maybe on a very high level, but on the level that most of us play with, it doesn't really apply. So I wanted to kind of take that word away from those people that were using that and kind of normalize it in a sense where it's not necessarily it would be the fact where if you post a card on your page, oh, suddenly you're pumping it, right? You couldn't show off anything. And I would have people message me saying that they were hesitant to show off this new card they acquired. So I didn't like that. So I wanted to try to like kind of take the burden of that from a lot of people and just use that word as much as I can to show that people that it doesn't have this negative connotation like people think. It actually, to me, it means like a pride of ownership. You show off a card, you pump these things that you spend your hard-earned money on, you show off your collection, you give it as much exposure as possible because you want to share it with a lot of people, with other people that maybe have not seen it before. And when I started doing that, I noticed that it was receptive to a lot of people in terms of like they were probably tired of all that pump and dump narrative themselves, where now they were feeling they were feeling like they could show off their collections also, and they could use that hashtag. So that's really why I kind of started it. Like you said, I leaned into this false narrative that people were trying to push, and just try to like normalize those words to let people know that it's okay to show off your collection. It's okay to have pride of ownership, and don't let online people bully you into feeling insecure about your collection.
I love that Daniel did that. And one thing I really appreciate about Daniel is that he's unapologetic. Like he's very puts his personality out there. He puts his beliefs out there, right? And he believes something like that. Like, no, I'm proud of my collection. I love displaying my collection, and I'm going to share my collection with the world. And you can say whatever you want. I'm going to post 1,000 Star Wars cards to Instagram, and you can say whatever the hell you want, but I don't care. I'm doing it. I know in my heart that I'm doing it for the right reasons, and I'm going to do it unapologetically. And I think that's great.
And if I can just add one more thing to that, Rob, in the beginning, I tried to defend myself with these people that were attacking me and accusing me of things. And I tried to appease their accusations or outrage. I tried to make everybody happy. What I learned is that those people, they had different motives. They had different motives for saying what they did. And it wasn't necessarily just because of the content that I was making, but they had their own motives for doing that. So at that point, I just told myself, you can't try to make everybody happy. You can't try to put all your focus and attention on the people that don't like you. Instead, you have to kind of use your limited time within the hobby and put that towards people that support you. And that's really when I really started to step up making my content, because I wanted to focus on not engaging with, these watchdogs, or I call them trolls, basically, engage with them directly, but engage with my audience and people that support me and make content that was entertaining to them. And that's really what has fueled me to this point.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Good points. And Geoff, I know that Dan is someone, he is always showing off his collection, the things that he owns. He's incorporating them into his reels, making really good content, regarding his collection and whatnot. And I think, to an extent, I can't speak for the hobby, I can speak for myself, that to me, that makes Dan more likable. And when I go to your page, Geoff, it doesn't seem like you're ever really showing off like, or not even showing up, but posting any cards, like new pickups or anything like that? Is there a reason? Have you like put thought behind not posting cards that you own, or do you just not own things long enough? Are you constantly kind of flipping things? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Oh no! First of all, I bought a ton of cards this year. I've been buying tons of cards every single month, and really haven't stopped, no matter market going up, market going down. And I own tons of cards, so no, it's not that at all. No, it's been somewhat of an intentional decision. I do occasionally post card pickups, but I do it sparsely instead of frequently or commonly. I've separated, like, if you go on it, for example, Instagram or TikTok, to use those as examples, or even now on YouTube, right? I've separated out my personal "It's Geoff Wilson" from Sports Card Investor. And my mission with my personal content, so my mission with Geoff Wilson, is that I want to celebrate entrepreneurship and encourage entrepreneurship and bring more entrepreneurs into the sports card hobby. I think that the sports card hobby is the ultimate training ground for entrepreneurs, because you can start in this hobby without a lot of money, and there's plenty of ways for you to be able to cut your teeth with entrepreneurship. You can go you could go be a dealer, you could go be a breaker, you could design a little product, as many people have done, and print them out on 3D printers and start to build a business that way. It's a hobby that allows people to be entrepreneurial and get things off the ground. I think it's great. I'm a huge believer in entrepreneurship. I've started 15 different companies, and this country, the United States, was founded by entrepreneurs. The reason why I believe that the United States is the greatest country in the world is because of the fact that we are the country that best encourages entrepreneurship and allows businesses to grow and thrive. And that has been a connective point throughout the history of our country, and it has kept our country great. And if this country is going to continue to be great in the future, it's going to be entrepreneurs who help this country be great, not politicians. It's going to be entrepreneurs that are the ones that help this country thrive and be great, just as they have for the last 200 plus years. And so I believe that I have a gift in the ability to speak and communicate to an audience. And I'm very thankful that I've been able to build an audience the way that I have. And so now I look at this and I say, I have a responsibility. I want to grow entrepreneurship in this country. I love working with startups and founders. I mentor at local tech centers. I want to bring more entrepreneurs into this hobby. So my It's Geoff Wilson content, I've started to veer more in that direction. My Geoff Wilson show, I veer more in that direction. I talk more business topics. I do reels where I'm talking business, and it's not 100% that, but I don't want it to be a feed where I'm just showing cards, because I actually want it to be consumed by people who maybe aren't that into the hobby, or at least not yet. I want to be able to affect people who are maybe interested in business and entrepreneurship or starting up a side hustle, but they're not like huge collectors yet. So they're going to get turned off by a feed that's nothing but cards. Separately, we got Sports Card Investor as a brand, and Sports Card Investor is, cards day and night. Sports Card Investor does a ton of posts about cards. Now, I don't feature that many of my own cards either over there. We do all kinds of other posts, and I've got a whole content team at Sports Card Investor that runs those accounts, and they do, card post all the time. So I feel like they do a lot of good things to kind of show more the card elements of the hobby.
Yeah. And you packed a lot in there with that response. And I think when it comes to these hobby purists, these hardcore collectors, exactly what your answer was the thing that really can rub people the wrong way is people are like, well, I don't want this guy Geoff Wilson coming in and creating a bunch of entrepreneurs in our hobby. Our hobby is our hobby. It's about the cards, and he's trying to make this a business, and we don't want this to be big business. And that's only going to hurt collectors, and it's going to drive out collectors. And so I think that's partially where that is. And I don't know if that helps them or it hurts them with what your response was, because
I think that's a little bit short-sighted, because innovation tends to make most things better, right? I mean, if you didn't have business people in the hobby, if you didn't have entrepreneurs coming into the hobby, then you never would have had grading. You never would have had online marketplaces. You wouldn't have live streaming advance the way that it was, the way that it has been. You wouldn't have content creators now, creating all different types of content. Like, I think that's foolish. Like, I think for the hobby, I respect collecting. I'm a huge collector myself. I love collecting. I'm addicted to collecting. I collect all kinds of cards and memorabilia. Like, my wife is sick of all the cards all over the house the entire time, all the time.
Same.
And they're all over. Yeah, they're all over my studio too. I love collecting and I respect collectors, but the hobby is not going to advance and get better if there's not innovative entrepreneurs that come in and try to make things happen. Look, Rob, like, one of the entrepreneurial things that I've added to the hobby is transparent pricing data. You can actually understand now, you can look at the price charts of cards and understand what things have sold for and what things are worth. Do you know what that was like 5 or 10 years ago, to go to a card show and have dealers tell you that, this card's worth this amount of money, and you have no way of really checking or verifying if that's true or not, and you're going to end up paying triple what the actual fair market value on a card is? I mean, give me a break. People, rag today on, like, people being so obsessed with comps. Comps is how you can actually help get yourself a fair deal. And that's I'm not trying to defend the use of comps in every situation. I understand some of the criticism that people have sometimes with the overuse of them in certain scenarios, but literally, by making pricing data transparent, we have made the hobby a safer place, because people are getting ripped off far less often. And people used to get ripped off a lot in this hobby. People don't get ripped off as much anymore. You go to a card show and you watch kids. I mean, this is where I love seeing impact. You watch 10-year-old kids walk around the show floor at a card show, go up to dealer booths and negotiate sharply with the dealer. They know the comps. They know the recent sales. They know what the card's worth. They know what they're willing to pay, what they're not going to pay on it. They go up there. They know their stuff. That wasn't possible 10 years ago. It's very possible today. And it's because entrepreneurs came into the hobby and they did work around comps and pricing data and all of that kind of thing. I'm not the only one. There's other entrepreneurs that obviously have apps and have done that kind of stuff. I think it's great. It's added transparency to the hobby. Just as grading added transparency around the quality and authentication of a card. That was a disaster 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before grading came into the hobby, and people were selling half the cards at card shows were fake, and half the Jordans and all this kind of stuff. People were getting screwed all the time. Innovation has really transformed the hobby for the better. And I understand that there's some bad that goes along with it, just like every other industry. Innovation will continue to transform the hobby for the better. And the only way that innovation is going to happen is if you allow and encourage more entrepreneurs to come into the hobby.
You know what? I like this, Geoff Wilson. You're kind of fired up.
I like am fired up because I know, look, Rob, I know, like, yes, I'm fired up on this stuff. Yes, I'm fired up on these topics.
Can I add to that too?
I get beat up a lot. I'm a punching bag on YouTube 24/7 these days. And, all these other, things is all the time. And you know what? I don't directly address it very much in my own stuff. Like, my own stuff, I stay focused. The Sports Card Investor channels, especially, we don't address any of it. None of it. We're going to continue to stay focused on growing this hobby, on showcasing great collectors, on showcasing great collections, and showing all of the great things that are going on in the sports card hobby and shining a spotlight on that. We're going to stay positive. We're going to grow this hobby, and we're going to highlight all the great stuff happening within it. And so, I don't get much chance to respond on this because I intentionally don't. But you're sitting here asking me questions, and I'm telling you how I really feel.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about this, let me just say for the listeners, is Geoff has no idea the questions I'm going to ask him. Right? I said, do you want to have an idea of a couple things I'm going to throw at you? He said, no. Let's just go on. I said, okay. So it does feel like this is the real passionate side of you, kind of coming out. So, I could respect that. Dan, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I think I love seeing this side of Geoff too. I think Geoff is in a different position. He's got a large subscriber base. He's got a lot of ingrained businesses in the hobby. So maybe he's not as free as somebody like me, where I've got very small comparison in terms of followers. He doesn't have enough freedom to clap back at a lot of these people. But to just speak to your point about these people that don't want innovation in the hobby, I think personally, I think it comes from a place of selfishness. I think that it's not that these people don't want their cards to go up in value, or they don't want the hobby to grow. It's just that they want access to those things. They're used to getting it at a certain way, a certain price, and when they see competition come in, they don't like that. Okay, and I think that that's kind of like a really old mindset, because for a long time before we had this big boom, the hobby was dying out. There's a certain generation of people that collected cards and memorabilia, and they've reached a certain age, and they're starting to get phased out. And if you don't have new kids come to card shows and learn to collect and build up memories the same way that we all had as kids, you're not going to have that next generation take over and carry that torch. So we have to understand that, and we also have to understand that the hobby has been invested in by big companies, so the train is going no matter what. We can sit here and we can be like what we call hate keepers, and we can try to keep people out and try to stop it from growing, or we can just contribute to it and go forward with everybody else and enjoy everything that comes with it. And I think that's the mindset that people have to have. Like, we need to embrace all the innovation, to change, all the new people. We have to kind of create a good community that's not very judgmental, or not trying to like keep people out. And that's really where everybody will get the benefit.
Dan,
man,
I know you had I think you said the word hate keepers with an H, right?
Yes.
But I know that about a year or so ago, there was a clip of you talking about being a gatekeeper to the hobby, and that seemed to really fire people up. So can you just briefly explain where that clip came from, and what you meant by that? Because I think in the context that most people see it, it's not a good look on your part, but I'm just kind of curious to get your side of where that clip kind of came from.
Sure. It was so long ago, I barely even remember, to be honest. And it's just like these people, they're bringing it up. But it's a false narrative that people are creating for their own benefits, mainly just to monetize their own channel. They want to create a narrative and attack me based off of this. But basically, what I was trying to say with gatekeeping in terms of the hobby, in the context of the hobby, is we have to keep out people that would take advantage of other people, people that would sell fake cards, people that would take advantage of kids not knowing how to comp prices, like Geoff was saying, people that would go to buy collections at like 10 cents on the dollar when they know they can turn it for more. Right? We have to keep out the bad people that are going to take advantage of other people in the hobby, and create what I call a very high standard of conduct within the hobby that we hold each other accountable to, and that will help weed out all the bad actors. So that's what that means. It doesn't mean keep out people from collecting or whatever else these people are trying to spin this narrative of. But the reason I use the word hate keeper is that this is what these people are trying to do. They're trying to create certain narratives within
So
the
when
hobby.
You say these people, you mean like trolls, hobby watchdogs, like
they call themselves hobby watchdogs. I think they're trolls. I think they're, if I'm going to be honest, I think their content is all trash. But what they try to do is they try to create a divisiveness within the hobby. They try to create certain camps, and they pick on people. They pick on Geoff. They pick on me. They pick on a lot of other people. And I really think it's unfair, because it just creates this animosity within the hobby, where we have to spend our time responding to it and talking about it, versus trying to educate or collect or just share fun, positive things. And within the context of the hobby, it just seems really silly to me, because for me, the hobby is an escape. It's not my full-time job. The limited time that I have to dedicate to the hobby is meant to be an escape from the real world, where there's real problems, real life responsibilities and things like that. And you got this certain subset of people here that are trying to like create a very toxic environment with the hobby. So that's why I use that term like hate keeper, because I want people to understand that if you're going to consume that type of content for whatever purpose, entertainment purpose or whatever, understand what it is first, rather than just kind of blindly following these people, letting them develop opinions about other people for you, and then acting on that.
Yeah. And all good points. Very well said. So I think when it comes to the hobby in general, right? There are clicks because you're talking about how they're trying to divide up people and whatnot. But I think we realize like it doesn't matter if you're in the hobby watchdog camp, if you're in the collector camp, if you're in the content creator camp, right? There are definitely clicks. There are definitely, and what I mean by clicks is there are definitely groups, and it kind of seems like there's anywhere between like 3 to 5 main groups of guys that or organizations or companies that all kind of do business with one another, and sometimes lines cross, sometimes they don't. So I'm kind of curious, like, you know what, I'll save this conversation for afterwards. Let's jump into these questions real quick because this feels, what I was about to go into felt like a really good end topic. Geoff, did you want to comment on anything that Dan said before we move on?
No, I loved his points, loved his passion.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So here's the deal. So I actually
you know what, Rob, I will say one thing. Sorry. Yep. I agree with Dan. There's way too much like negativity and people just trying to drum up dramatic stories for YouTube views. And I think that's, what Dan's talking about with the hate keepers. There's a good side to being gatekeepers as well. And I want to be clear, like, although like Dan,
this might be clipped right here. So
no, look, there are bad things that happen in the hobby. There are scams. There are breakers that try to take advantage of people. There are card trimmers. There are, marketplace employees doing bad things. Like there are bad things that happen in the hobby. It is good that there are people, accounts, channels that call some of this stuff out. I think that's actually positive. I have no problem with it. Here's the thing. Those channels need to approach these things with journalistic integrity. Journalistic integrity means they need to not just report on a rumor, but they need to actually do research, and they need to reach out to the accused and ask them their side of the story and their comments. What's going on here. They need to verify stories with other people, and then they need to report it as factually as they possibly can. The problem is that a lot of these accounts are not doing any of those things. In fact, all these YouTube accounts that, come after me now with all these videos, there's only one or two that have ever once sent me a message on Instagram or an email or anything of that sort and said, hey, I heard this. Can you comment on this? Or I'm going to do a video about this. What's your perspective on this? The rest of them, the vast, vast majority of them, just run with unsubstantiated rumors because they want clicks. And they honestly don't even really care if anything they're saying is true, because all they're trying to do is get clicks to drive their view counts up and drive monetization. And that's not what the hobby needs. Watchdogs are good as long as they act with journalistic integrity and try to verify. We need more of that, more of the good watchdogs. I would totally support there being more good watchdogs in the hobby, less of the ones that show no journalistic integrity at all.
Can I add one thing to that, Rob? I totally agree with that too. And I think the problem that we're facing right now with these accounts that make these videos is that what they're doing is they're trying to form opinions for their followers. And their followers are not even probably even consuming content that Geoff makes or I make or anybody else. They don't even know us. They don't even follow us. They don't even watch our stuff. But they're allowing these people to create false grievances within their minds. And now they have a problem with it and they're acting on that. And I think that's a problem. I think anything I'll speak personally for myself, anything that's ever said about me, I would challenge anybody to go to my Instagram feed, go to my YouTube channel, see the content that I'm producing and compare it to what is being said about me. And you'll see that it's just not applicable to a lot of the things that are out there. So, that's a big problem where these people, they're trying, like Geoff was saying, they're trying to get clicks. They're trying to monetize their channels. So they're trying to be as entertaining and as salacious as they can with their content. But there's a lot of people that only consume that content and they allow that content to form an opinion in their mind. And that's why they have problems. And that's what's creating the division in the hobby. So, all four watchdogs, if there's like real issues in the hobby you want to report on, no problem. All for transparency and everything like that. But just understand that, that's what's happening right now. So we have to try to get away from that a little bit and try to balance it out so that there's not so much division.
Yeah, and good points made by both of you guys. And what I would say is this, I'm staying very, I have a tremendous amount of respect for both you gentlemen, but I am trying to stay very, very neutral in terms of just kind of varying viewpoints. But I'm going to tell you guys my first ever impression / interactions with each of you guys. And Geoff, you probably don't remember ours. Dan, I'm sure you remember ours. So, and this might give you a little bit of context, I guess, into the way that I do view you guys. So my first ever interaction with you, Geoff, was in at the National in Chicago, Rosemont, Illinois, 2 years ago. Right, what was that, 21? And I'm sitting down there at the bottom of the escalator waiting for National to open up its doors. And I'm just standing there in a group of about 10 guys. We're all just kind of shooting the stuff and showing each other cards. I actually made a pretty big deal with a guy that was standing right there. All of a sudden I look over, oh, there's Geoff Wilson. No big deal. I wasn't a big fan of your content or anything. So I wasn't like, oh my God, Geoff. I was just like, oh, cool, yeah, there's Geoff. And you started telling our circle of guys about a big purchase that you had just made yesterday, or a negotiation that started yesterday and today you were about to pull the deal. And that was a full complete set of on-card auto of the Dream Team set.
I love that. I still have that. It's one of my favorite pieces
Do
of my
you?
collection.
Let me tell you something.
Love that.
The joy on your face when you were talking about that. There were no cameras around. No one was filming you. No one was filming. You just had pure joy talking about this Dream Team set. And I'm 40 years old. Loved the Dream Team. I had the whole starting lineup figure, with all the figurines, and I could still remember which guys had the metal rod going through their knee because they were dunking. I could still remember all their poses and everything. So when you were talking about that, I'm like, this is freaking awesome. This is really cool. And you were really fired up about it. And the fact that you still have it today, I mean, that's pretty cool. So, when I think of Geoff Wilson, I really don't go to Sports Card Investor. And I think that's because I haven't ever really consumed the content. And I've seen some of the videos, but I don't really consume the content. So when I think of Geoff Wilson, the first thought I always think of is you picking up that Dream Team set and how psyched you were about it and how you just wanted to tell whoever would listen about this really cool pickup that you had.
Well, that's awesome, Rob. I'm glad we had that interaction. And I absolutely love that set. That's one of my favorite sets. In fact, I brought it in the studio the other day. I was showing it off to,
was that the Skybox set?
It was the Skybox Barcelona, 1991 Skybox Barcelona. Yeah.
Love that set.
Yeah. Super cool. What I would say, Rob, to you and to the people listening is if you enjoy that, you really should check out some of our Sports Card Investor content, because the content we do these days, not all of it, but some of it it's much different than what it was a few years ago. We really highlight great collectors, great collections. We did a whole video series over the last year called Slabs, with probably 10 or 12 episodes of it, where we went into the homes of very prominent collectors and spent hours with them in their home going through their collection. And then we condensed it down to a really great 15-minute video. And we did several of these, and we've done a whole bunch of things like that really just highlight cards and the hobby. And, there's so much good stuff there. So I'd love to have you back on the Sports Card Investor channel to check that out at some point.
And I was actually going to save this for the end, because part of what my preparation was to ask you about you. It seems like your brand has started to pivot somewhat from you just standing in front of the camera saying hello, and now you're sitting on a couch with a microphone in front of you, more relaxed, sipping a latte. You have your hoodie on with the blazer over it, and you're just, it's a different vibe. So how strategic is that on your part? Like, I'm curious, like, is that sincere, that shift, or is it you feeling like, you know what, the hobby really is kind of fed up with this investor stuff? And I'm not saying the hobby is, because I think there's still plenty of kids that enjoy it, and grown-ups too. But how strategic was that you are starting to shift more toward collector based?
We very, very much so. A couple of years ago, and this isn't a recent thing. I mean, we really made this decision back in 2021. We saw the prices of cards starting to go down, and And we said, okay, you know what? It's like we need to rethink our content here a little bit. Frankly, we didn't want people to get hurt. Like doing the investor content when all the cards were going up and up all the time was easy and people loved it and they were having fun with it because everyone was flipping. But as soon as we saw the cards start to fall in price, we're like, maybe we need to back off that content a little bit, because we don't want to be focused just on that and frankly have people get hurt. So at that point, we intentionally shifted more of our content towards highlighting great collectors, highlighting collecting, and also frankly just having fun, like just showcasing what's great about the hobby, showcasing what's fun. I think, yes, my own presence has become more relaxed over time, you know, and intentionally so, because it's now more about kind of showcasing what's great about the hobby. I talk business on my personal accounts, but on, you know, Sports Card Investor as a whole, we're trying to showcase collecting.
Yeah, and
can I add one thing to that, Rob? You know,
yeah.
That story that you just told, that's what the hobby's about. It's about acquiring something super cool and sharing it with other people that can appreciate it and sharing that passion, and maybe igniting that passion in somebody else where they go try to collect that set or that card or whatever it is. And I think that you know, there's some people that have become so cynical with the hobby where they will just view that as like what they call pumping, right? And that's kind of goes back to what I was trying to tell people before, is like, you have to have a pride of ownership about your collection. And this is how we grow. We share our collection with people. We inspire other people to start these similar collections. And that's really what it is, you know? And just like Geoff was saying, where, you know, his content is evolving, so is the hobby. The hobby is evolving. And you're having a lot of people, you know, they make videos about something that somebody said a year ago. That stuff really just like isn't that much relevant anymore, because the hobby has evolved so much. So I think that we just have to keep a focus on that and keep sharing those type of stories. And I think people will start to appreciate it more.
That's a great point about going back and continuing to butcher old content, right? Because I think, you know, I'll speak for myself. I know I've continued to grow and I've evolved, and you know, my episode 50 is definitely a lot different than this is going to be episode 177. So my content has definitely changed over the last couple of years and evolved. I think my knowledge has evolved, and as the market has continued to change, I've continued to adapt and kind of change with that. So before I go into the question, you know what, Dan, I wanted to tell the story about you. I'll tell it really quick, but let's jump into the question. So the first time, Dan, I came across you, and this is how I always think of you, Dan, when you come up, because I do find myself somehow inadvertently like defending you often, Dan. And I think it's because I've had you on my show a couple times. I've talked about, you know, just like, oh, I had a great conversation, 2-hour conversation with Dan on the phone the other day. And then people like will tend to kind of jump in, and I'm always kind of like feel like I'm defending you. But my first ever interaction with you was me talking about on my show. I said, you know what? I want to be one of the top Hulk Hogan collectors in the world. I want to somehow enter that top 10, because I know there's a lot of Hulk Hogan collectors out there, and I'm a Hulkamaniac till I die. And someone said, well, if you want to be considered top Hulk Hogan collector, you need to have a PMG. So I said, you know what? Yeah, absolutely. I need the PMG. And someone said, you know what? The great Curator has a PMG. So I slid into your DMs. And then from there, you know, you and I made a deal. I was blown away by your collection as I'm scanning your page, asking what you have available. And you ended up selling me this Hulk Hogan PMG a year ago. Still have it, right? So I bought that from you, and then from there I saw like you were making some funny reels, and I said, dude, let's collaborate on a reel. And so from across the country, me in Connecticut, you in California, we did a reel where we were tossing back and forth the PMG to each other, and it was really cool. So regardless of what, you know, kind of happens, like I'm always like, first impressions are, you know, always kind of going to be ingrained in us, and those are my first impressions of you guys, you know, for better or worse. And a lot of people are probably gonna be pissed off at me for kind of, you know, making it sound like, you know, I do have good first impressions with you guys, because I do. So, you know, I definitely just wanted to say that. But let's jump to this, because we only have about 15 minutes left at the most. So I reached out to about 20 to 30 of my closest friends in the hobby. I didn't want to put it out publicly. I was interviewing you guys for the roundtable. I kind of wanted it to be a surprise. So I asked about 20 or 30 people, high-end vintage collectors, hardcore collectors, members of my wolf pack like that. I said, hey, I'm going to be interviewing Dan and Geoff. Do you have any questions? So are you guys ready for these questions?
Sure. Should we go rapid fire?
Bring it on.
Rapid fire. Okay. So Geoff and Dan, Oz from the Cousins Collectibles wants to know, how does it feel being the hobby scapegoat for all the negative people in the hobby?
At first, it was somewhat shocking, and I wasn't like, I don't think anyone's quite ready for that. I wasn't quite ready for it, and it caused me a lot of sleepless nights, to be quite honest. Then you get used to it, and you just everyone who's got really big followings always says it goes along with it. It's always going to happen to everybody who has a really big following. You got to have thick skin and understand it's part of the game and part of the rise, and understand that it means that you're doing something right and that you have marketed yourself well enough that you've got enough eyeballs on you that trolls want to come out and attack you. So that's, at this point, honestly, for the most part, I don't lose sleep about it. The only time when it still gets under my skin is if somebody accuses me of like illegal activity.
Okay.
That's when it really gets under my skin.
Yeah.
Because I've done nothing of the sort, and there's, that's the one thing that really just still gets me mad. But outside of that, I shrug it off and laugh at it.
For me, in the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, it hurt my feelings in the beginning. But after a while, I kind of developed like a hardened skin to it. I steeled my mentality towards it, and now I kind of view myself as more like a shield for my community of followers in terms of the things that we collect and the criticism that we receive. So now I feel like I almost have to like protect a lot of people by taking a lot of the flack that comes my way. But the way that I view it is like, I realize that it's not necessarily personal. I believe that it's on a higher level where people are just trying to monetize their accounts, and I'm an easy target for whatever reason. So that's kind of how I view it. And honestly, I kind of use it as motivation to drive me forward. By the time these people make a video or a piece of content about something I did a year ago, I've already made like 100 new pieces of content. So because of that, because of my passion for the hobby and what I do, they just can't keep up with me. And that just kind of like protects me against any of the negative criticism. The only time I get really upset is if they cross the line and did talk about like family members and things like that. And I've shared stories with you, Rob, about that. So that's the only time I really get upset about it. But other than that, I just kind of look at it as myself. This is the role that I have to play right now. Maybe that will change and evolve in time. But for right now, that's where I am. And I'm okay with that.
All right. Now, Dan, I know that you are a big Disney collector, and I will say, and I told you this right before actually the episode aired, that I finally got my hands on a really nice copy of the 1931 Walt Disney Rookie with Mickey Mouse sitting on his lap. I've had that in my sights for 2 years now, and I just never pulled the trigger because I never found a copy that I liked enough for the price point that I was willing to pay for it. So let me just say, Dan, you were the first person that I actually knew that owned a copy of that. And it's not the most rare card in the world. You can go online and probably find one in 10 minutes. You might be overpaying for it, but you were the first person that I knew that actually owned one of those. But my question is this. So Dan, and then really Geoff, talk to me about the Disney trading card game. And this is a combination of a question from Craig at New York City Sports Cards and Tony at Cousins Collectibles. Talk to me about the Disney trading card game. Geoff, you went on record saying that you thought that Disney was going to overtake Pokemon in popularity. And it did feel like there was a bit of playfulness there in what you were saying, but I think you could understand why people thought that like you were like trying to pump this thing, and that somehow you were getting some kind of money on the backside for really trying to pump this, because it just didn't make sense. We all know that Disney would not overtake Pokemon, I think, at least in the short term. So talk to me about that. Were you trying to pump?
No, first of all, I just got it back from spending a weekend at Disney World. Had a great time. Paid for my own trip in full, because then some people accused Disney World of like giving me a free trip or something. No, absolutely no pumping. I own 0 Lorcana. You can't even own it. I mean, it's not even out yet. It comes out in August. There's no way to own it other than if you bought like the D23 preview cards from last year, which I don't have. Nor did I get any money from Disney or anything that's of the sort. No, what I said specifically, everyone forgets the first part of the sentence. What I said is if Disney puts their full weight behind Lorcana, it will overtake Pokemon. I actually still believe that could be the case, but I do not believe that Disney will put their full weight behind Lorcana. So I gave a big disclaimer if Disney does this. And my point was just simply the amount of resources that Disney has in America and the amount of following that Disney has in America versus Pokemon. Now, what I underestimated was the passion of the Pokemon community and how that really got people riled up. I truly wasn't actually doing it at first just to get people riled up. I truly wasn't. I actually was speaking my mind coming back from Disney. And I'm like, man, if Disney were to really apply themselves, they could become as bigger than Pokemon. But I wasn't trying to be that controversial, but it of course ended up being very much so. And I respect the Pokemon community. There's a lot of really, really passionate Pokemon collectors out there who disagreed with my take, and I understand it.
All right, so next, this is from Travis, who goes by Jackies and Jordans on Instagram. Let me tell you, he has one of the absolute best eyes for vintage I've ever seen. This guy, incredible collection. He really knows his stuff. Jackies and Jordans, and he says I like Geoff. I think he gets shit on because people just like the shit. I think he's playing with his wife's money from her successful startup, which he helped with, and wanted to try to roll that success into a hobby that he enjoys and tried to make a successful hobby-related business out of it. He's built useful tools and creates great content for kids. And he's clearly a great dad and a family guy. He also creates jobs for people who probably love working for him and get to work in a hobby that they love. If you're buying cards because he's creating content around the latest Hot 5, effectively treating him as your financial advisor, well, that's on you. I don't know. That I probably don't care about that. He's a good guy. I would focus on the good things he's brought to the hobby and what he does for the kids. And then he followed that up with, as far as a great curator, I would ask him to create a master class on trolling. I think he's hilarious.
Rob, I love that comment, by the way. Like, that is totally, I love that. Like, if somebody's recognizing those things, like that's what I want people to see. I'm trying to add value to the hobby with my, with bringing innovation and new products to the hobby. I'm investing in startups in the hobby, giving entrepreneurs a chance, like literally writing checks to entrepreneurs in the hobby to give them a chance to make their business big. I'm creating content because I'm passionate about it and I love it. I'm creating jobs in the hobby. I employ 25 people full-time in the hobby, like giving people the chance to work in what they love. I love all of those things. And by the way, I have an extremely successful wife and I'm damn proud of her. And it amazes me the people that try to use that as some type of attack against me. I think it's the greatest thing ever. It's wonderful that she's as successful as she is. And I was humbled to be a small part of that. So that's a fantastic comment. Who said, I want to go follow that person on Instagram. Who said that?
At Jackies and Jordans.
I like Jackies.
I think there's underscores between the three words,
all
but
right.
yeah, at Jackies and Jordans. His name is Travis. Like I said, he has one of the greatest eyes for vintage I've ever seen. The guy's great. He's been on my show a few times on a couple of my roundtables. So
I think there's a question in there for me, Rob.
Well, the question, all he said was you should create a master class for trolling because he thinks you're hilarious.
I secretly, I love trolling people. I gotta admit, I
don't think it's a secret. I think
I've got jokes for days. But here's what I'll say to this: there was a point where I used to clap back at a lot of people that attacked me, and one day it got to the point where one day I was like spending a lot of hours doing this stuff, and I was like, why am I wasting my time engaging with this person that is attacking me when I should be making more entertaining reels for other people that I can better bring value to, and that's where I think hobby accountability has to be. Where do we spend our time? How do we consume the content, and what do we do with that? And from that point on, I kind of made it a focus to try to be like more entertaining, more focused on positivity versus always wrapping myself up in these little battles. I'll still do it from time to time for a laugh, but I've definitely restrained myself since then.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So next question. This is for Geoff, and this is from Matt Sargo. He's actually Matt from Providence on Instagram. And Geoff, I think he actually you you featured him for like 3 minutes in one of your clips. I think it might have been from last year's Fenway show, and he had the crazy Mickey Mantle collection. He had like
Oh yeah, yeah.
the dog food Mickey
Yep, yep.
Mantle, and
I
yep.
remember.
So he reached out.
Nice guy. Nice
I
guy.
reached yeah. So I reached out to him because I knew that, you know, he likes your content, and I know he was in the video. So he said, with the recent video of Evan Mathis giving a tutorial on how to trim cards, Matt wants to know if this actually increases the value of low end and mid end vintage, considering it's probably hasn't been trimmed, the low end stuff. So does it actually increase the value knowing that most high end might be trimmed?
I don't know. That's interesting. I haven't really thought about that. That's kind of an interesting angle on it. Yeah, I don't know what to think about that. Like I obviously I just absolutely hated that video that, you know, Evan Mathis did, and we haven't talked about it on my channel
I
because
was
I don't
going to
think
ask you if you've commented on that.
no, you know, we thought about it. We talked about it as a team. And we said, you know what? We don't want to bring any more attention or light to this. We know other channels are going to do it. They were already doing it. And we're like, we don't want to bring any more attention or light to this. This is such like just a crappy thing, frankly, just an awful thing. And like, I don't want the video to get any more views than it already has. And so we didn't. I don't know, like what, you know, I don't know. It's a sad and scary thing to think about, Rob. And you know, that a lot of vintage cards, you know, high grade could be trimmed that. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of thoughts on that right now.
All right. Now, I guess because it's time to, we got a few minutes left, and I want to give you guys a moment. Short answer. Do you guys have any regrets with any decisions that you have made in the hobby, any takes that you've had, anything that you wish you can go back and say, you know what, that specifically I kind of wish I didn't say or I didn't do, you know, wasn't my finest moment, kind of thing. And I don't just mean like a take like the Will Greer thing, right? Like I don't mean something like that, but I mean something a bit bigger. Is there anything looking back on it that you guys wish that you had done different? And Dan, we could start with you.
I mean, hindsight is always, you know, great to have, you know, and I guess you could say you want to change a lot of things, but honestly, you know, I'm probably not. You know, everything that I've done in the hobby has kind of led me on this path where I've evolved to the point where I am now, and I'm continuing to evolve, and I'm always going to be like that. And I've always tried to be true to myself, and I've always tried to be respectful to everybody that I've dealt with, be nice, make as many friends as I can. And you know, I really have nothing that I regret doing. There's things that people want me to regret, but honestly, that's just their own narrative that they're trying to push. So I would say honestly, no. I mean, the only thing I wish I could have done is I wish I would have got in the hobby earlier and just had more experience and just kind of continue to build what I do. But you know, honestly, I'm just having a great time doing this, and I'm trying my best to bring a value and entertainment to everybody that follows me, and that's just going to be to continue to be my path.
And you know, Rob, from my perspective, by the way, my other call just canceled. So if you got more questions, we can keep going for a few more minutes.
Go
overtime.
Yeah, I would say there are things that I regret. I wish that I had focused and had helped my audience focus on iconic cards of goats and a little bit less ultra modern.
You're speaking my language now.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it was all, you know, I was all ultra modern all the time the first couple of years. And in fairness, ultra modern was what was hot in 2019 and 2020. And so I was doing a lot of, you know, this card's going up, and it was all ultra modern. But I wish I had taken a little bit more of a long view back then. And I wish I would have highlighted, you know, more vintage and that kind of thing. It took me a while to really get into vintage and to look at different eras of cards beyond just beyond ultra modern. And I would have liked to have gone back and exposed the audience to that more quickly. I think that would have been, I think that would have been a good thing to do. The other thing too is I was a bit overly optimistic that, in 2021, I was a bit overly optimistic that the heat of the market was going to continue. I did sense that in early 2021 that like, this thing's getting a little too hot, but then things dropped a little bit. And I was like, okay, it's kind of leveled back out now, things will start to kind of go back up again at some point here. And of course we encountered a couple of year pretty severe slide in card prices that in some cases is still going on. In other cases has stabilized pretty nicely the last several months. But, I wish I probably should have been a little less optimistic, and I should have been more looking at the long term with, vintage goat cards.
Yeah. All right. And this next question is really a comment. I think I don't know if there's a question tucked away somewhere in here, but this might kind of piggyback off maybe a regret, or maybe it's not a regret for you. So Nate in Cardboard Veritas on Instagram, he's part of my in my vintage group, my vintage hobby chat, and he's been on my show plenty of times. Incredible eye for vintage as well. He said that he agrees with Travis at Jackie's and Jordan's, especially about the fact that Geoff seems consistently committed to creating good experiences for kids in the hobby. The thing that he did that I found off-putting was his left turn into NFTs back a while ago, when those were the flavor of the month. I'd wonder what he learned from that short-lived misadventure. But otherwise, yeah, I like him more than it seems like some hobby people do. Seems like a good, positive dude who just seems to enjoy the hobby and helping kids. So it sounds like there's a compliment wrapped up in there, right? But a big point that he makes are the NFT things, where it did seem like there were certain content creators that were pushing NFTs and playing Monday morning quarterback, right? Just playing Monday morning quarterback. I think it could seem like, well, maybe these content creators are really trying to juice their audience, trying to get as much juice out of that squeeze as possible. What are your thoughts on playing Monday morning quarterback on the whole NFT push?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the comment about kids. That's a huge mission at Sports Card Investor. Like my whole team and I, like we are all about trying to get more kids in the sports card hobby. Obviously, my sons are big in the sports card hobby, and they have their own YouTube channel, Card Kids, and we give out free repacks to kids at every single card show we go to, and so that's a big piece of it. So I appreciate him and the other gentleman recognizing that.
Which let me jump in real quick. I could remember seeing you. You didn't walk by our table, but I remember seeing that you were filming with your son at Rick Probstein's Autograph Fest in New Jersey at that mall last year. And I think looking back at the video, I went back and I saw some of the video, and your son actually made a pretty good deal. And that was something that I know you were proud of, your son was proud of. So that was kind of cool to see.
That was a lot of fun. NFTs, I bought into the hype a little bit about digital collecting and the future of collecting, and part of the future of collecting is digital. I actually think there's still some truth to that. Like I think that obviously NFTs had a big boom and a big bust, and there was all this speculation and everything like that. I don't think that story's over. Like I think it's going to be interesting to see how people approach that in 10 years, 20 years from now. But it was obviously there was a whole lot of hype and boom bust around.
Would you change your approach to it if it came up again in 2 years? If in 2 years again you felt like NFTs were starting to bubble up, would you jump on that? Because, and I'm not saying it was you per se, but it does feel like sometimes content creators always want to be the first to like jump on something if it is, because if that was a major success, that would have only catapulted you and your brand more, right? So I think in a way it does feel like sometimes when the media just tries to get out a story first and they get it wrong, I think it does feel like there's some of that in there. I'm not sure what you think.
Look, what we did with NFTs specifically is we partnered with some of the biggest sports card breakers, like Layden Sports Cards, a lot of the really, really big breakers, Mojo Break, and we turned their biggest breaking moments ever into collectible NFTs. So them pulling the 101 cards and everything like that. They were all into the idea. We were into the idea. We thought that we thought that this was going to be something that people were going to want to collect, and it was going to be a form of digital collectible. And we thought that like, we saw this like bright future to it. Like if you had a big card pulled out of a break, then you could go get the NFT associated with the card, own that moment of the video of it being pulled out. Like we saw some really cool future to it like that. So we jumped into it, and it was not successful. We tried to sell these collectible moments. We sold like 20, over the first couple of days. We received a ton of flack from it, from, our audience and everything like that. And it became very obvious very quick that this was not something the hobby wanted. This was not something our audience wanted. And so I got back together with the team and I said, look, we made a mistake here. And I have no regrets about trying to do something innovative and different in the space. We just missed in terms of what we thought the community was going to like and respond well to, and it wasn't that. So what we did, and I think this is a really important part of the story, is we, a few days in, said, okay, this is not working right. So we turned the project off, and then we refunded every single person who bought one of these 100% of the money that they paid, so that they were all proper. Like everyone got refunded 100%. And I still offered to pay out all the breakers 100% of the fee that I was supposed to pay them for licensing, their NFTs for the revenue share. So everybody was whole. Everybody was paid out. It cost me a ton of money. Nobody lost any money except for me. And so, it was certainly an experiment gone wrong. I mean, yeah, it was obviously not the right thing to chase in retrospect. We tried to do something innovative. I wish we had done something more core hobby as opposed to trying to be quite that innovative.
And yeah, and let me just jump in on that. I think and I can't speak for the hobby, I would never try to, but I think what rubbed some people that I've spoken with the wrong way, including myself to an extent, and not just you, I think all NFTs, because you were far from being the only one that was trying to push NFTs. You're just probably the second biggest guy other than Gary Vee, right? I mean, there were definitely some, and I think what rubbed probably myself and others the wrong way is this hobby is about collecting sports cards, and sometimes it feels like outside forces or even inside forces, because I'm not saying you're an outside force. I think that you are someone that enjoys collecting and enjoys really being in this hobby, but I think that people look at sports card collectors as someone that will buy anything that is deemed collectible. So sometimes people will come in and try to poach sports card collectors because they know we like buying collectible things. Whereas in fact, it's for most of us, it's about the cards and not so much all the extra stuff. And sometimes it feels like, outside forces are trying to do that. They're trying to come in and poach people, if that makes sense.
Look, that's fair. I mean, the NFTs that we did though were NFTs of moments in the hobby. Like it wasn't like they were card moments. It wasn't like it was something off the, out there, like in terms of that. You have Panini creating NFTs, and they still do to this day. You got Topps creating NFTs. They've now gotten out of that business, but Topps was in the NFT business. So, I mean, look, it's fine. Like if people want to criticize and say, should we have hopped on the trend? I mean, no, in retrospect, we shouldn't have hopped on the trend. It didn't work. And people didn't respond well to it, but like it was something we tried that was innovative, that we truly thought was going to be a positive for the community, that we were going to immortalize these big card breaking moments and turn them into collectibles. We thought that was going to be a positive for the community. Clearly, the community didn't agree. And look, that's the great thing about America and capitalism, is people can vote with their wallets. And if you can try an idea and put it out there to the world, and if people, if people reject it, then they reject it. And that's what happened in this case. So we backpedaled and made everybody whole.
Yeah. And so Thank you for that. And I, we could get close to wrapping this up here. I'm curious, what is your relationship with Michael Rubin, the CEO of Fanatics? What's the relationship status of you guys at this point? And do you think that you're going to have a role with Fanatics moving forward when eventually the big takeover happens?
Look, I'm extremely optimistic about what Fanatics is going to do in the sports card hobby. I think it's going to be a
Yeah.
really great thing. And part of the reason why I'm continue to be really bullish on the growth of this hobby over the next 5 to 10 years is because of Fanatics coming in and what a lot of their plans are. I don't know Michael Rubin very well. I've had the opportunity to meet him and talk to him, but I don't converse with Michael Rubin very often. I do, however, converse with a lot of the other people at Tops and Fanatics quite often, and it's been a great relationship. And I can tell you that they ask for my feedback on things. They ask for my input on things. Sometimes I unsolicited offer my feedback and input on things. And what I can tell you is that they're approaching this very strategically. I think they've got the right mindset. They're very focused on the collector. Their goal is to grow the number of collectors in the sports card hobby by 10x in the upcoming years. And they say collector, collector. They're very focused on the collector. And I could tell you that they've even to me said at times like Geoff, we can't get too associated with you at all times because we want to stay impartial from the secondary market. Like we want to Tops and Fanatics is here to grow collectors, and we're not here to, place too much emphasis on the secondary market. And so, I think their heart's in the right place.
Could you see a time at some point in the future where maybe you take a position with Fanatics?
No, I don't see that happening. I enjoy what Fanatics is doing, and I will definitely support them in what they're doing. But I'm not going to do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think the hobby needs independent voices, and because being independent, I like the fact that I'm independent. We've look, Sports Card Investors received multiple acquisition offers before from big companies in the hobby, and I've turned them down. And part of my reason for turning them down was because I was kind of worried what that would mean for our content in the future. Like, okay, if we're part of this company, is all of our content now kind of about what that company's doing, or is that company able to kind of tell us not to do certain content, right? Which I didn't love the thought of that. So I like being independent from that perspective. And there's still a lot more entrepreneurial stuff we want to do. Like I haven't had a boss since high school, and I don't really want a boss because there's a lot of entrepreneurial stuff I want to still do. And I'm working on a massive project, and I'm not ready to talk about it right here today, but I'm working on a project that's going to completely transform a whole lot of stuff around sports
Give
cards.
us something, Geoff. Give us the
really great
exclusive.
way.
Give us something, Geoff.
It's going to be big, Rob. It's going to be big. I'm super excited about this project that I'm working on. It's a little premature to come out with all the details, but big things are happening. We're super excited about it. And, it's several months ahead still, but, around the first of the year, we're going to have some really cool stuff that I think, and by the way, something for collectors everywhere, that I think people are really going to enjoy.
I love it. I love it. Well, Dan, I see you're over there. You're going to need a refill on your drink soon. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about Fanatics? Moving ahead in the future, Dan.
I think it's great. Going to what I said earlier in the show, where the hobby is evolving. To me, the more investment that I see within the hobby, the better. I want to see companies come in. I want to see companies build infrastructure. I want to see competition, innovation, new products. I think it's exciting. It's not going to be for everybody, and it doesn't have to be for everybody, but it's better than the hobby being stagnant and not growing or regressing or shrinking, right? So for me, I'm positive about all that stuff. And I like this. I like seeing that the effort that they're putting in. And we'll just kind of have to wait to see how it all turns out, And I'm sure there's going to be some great things that they do, but there's going to be some bad things that they do. But as long as they keep trying, then I think that's okay. And just kind of going back to that last segment where Geoff was talking about his NFTs, for me, I'm all about like just trying out new things. It's not going to be for everybody. Not everybody doesn't have to buy everything or consume everything, but we want people to try to, innovate in the hobby and bring new exciting things. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm never going to fault anybody for trying to make something better.
Yeah. No, very well said. Very well said. And I guess to wrap it up, gentlemen, this is kind of putting you on the spot. So chances are you're probably going to miss a moment and think back and say, oh, I should have said that. But I'm curious, what is a moment that you have had in the hobby that you are most proud of, that you most just hang your hat on and say, yes, that's what I'm about. I did that. And that's what I represent.
That's easy for me. That's easy for me. I mean, for me, it's opening up packs with my son and getting to see the joy on kids' faces at card shows, and getting to talk and interact with kids. And I mean, that to me is what it's all about. I'm super proud of seeing these kids at card shows who know their stuff because they've been, watching what we do and watching what other content creators do and a bit, doing their homework and then getting to experience the hobby with my son, opening up packs with him, going around card shows with him, and getting to kind of re-experience it all again through his eyes. Because as a 12-year-old, that was my world back then too. So that's definitely, kind of my proudest thing.
Wow. And I have like two follow-up thoughts as you're talking, right? I'm like Family Guy. I have all these thought bubbles going on as you're talking. So the first thing that's coming to my mind is when I was a kid, I used to get Beckett magazine in the mail, and the name Beckett is synonymous with the hobby for me. I had no idea who Dr. Beckett was when I was younger. I had no idea what he looked like. I had no idea it was even a person. I was a 10-year-old getting it in the mail every week or every month. But if for you to be having the kind of impact on kids that you have now, the feels that I get when I think of the name Beckett, imagine this entire generation of kids growing up and getting the feels when they hear your name or they think of you, for you to have what potentially could be that kind of impact on them in the currently and in the years to come. That's incredible. That's almost like too much for me to wrap my head around.
Well, I haven't even thought about that. That is incredible. But I, like you, Beckett was that for me as a kid. And I tell you, one of my favorite moments, Rob, being in the hobby was I got an email, unsolicited random email in my inbox. And this was in January of 2020. So I had only started my channel in the summer of 2019. And by January 2020, I don't think I had 10,000 YouTube subscribers yet, maybe right around 10,000. And I had never, like, I didn't know anyone. Like I never got, I didn't really know anyone. I was still brand new. And I got an email in my inbox. I don't even know how I got my email address, but I got an email in my inbox from Dr. James Beckett. And he said, I've been watching your show. And I think you're, a different, unique voice in the hobby. I like a lot of what you have to say. I'd like to invite you to my house for a dinner. And I was like, oh, what's this? I remember running upstairs and telling my wife, I'm like, Dr. Beckett emailed me. She's like, who's Dr. Beckett? I'm like, the price guide guy, So I went to his house in February of 2020 and had dinner. And there were other people invited as well, other people from the card industry. And it was, that was a special moment. That was because that was a full circle, all this, like from the kid idolizing Beckett. And now all of a sudden I'm having dinner at Dr. Beckett's house. I was like, oh, this is cool.
I've heard stories and urban legends about this content creator dinner that he hosts at National. So my invite has gotten lost in the mail for the last 2 years, but it's okay. I'm not mad. I don't hold a grudge, Dr. Beckett. I don't hold grudges. No. But also I think the last point that I was thinking was, and I'm wondering, is there going to be a point? It kind of feels like you're phasing out Sports Card Investor and you're just going with Jeff Wilson. Is there, am I onto something here? 5 years from now, is Sports Card Investor, that brand, even going to exist, or is Jeff Wilson going to be the brand?
Oh, no, very much. I want to do both. So the sports card, I think now a sports card investor like ESPN for the sports card hobby. So that's kind of our goal. Like our goal with sports card investor is to have different types of programming and different voices and different personalities and cover the breadth of the sports card hobby. So I'll be on sports card investor, but we'll have other voices and personalities. And we already do, like some of the other people from my team, like Teapot gets highlighted in a lot of the content, and Ben and Doug are in some of the content as well. And so think of sports card investor as like ESPN for the hobby. That's where we're going with that. And then my personal is just me and my own, kind of, opinions on things. And so both will definitely continue to grow, but they are a little different. We've intentionally separated them, and we're going to continue to do that.
All right. So Dan, proudest moment in the hobby.
Well, I wish I had a story to share that I met Dr. Beckett. I think me and you, Rob, we're gonna have to crash that party. Maybe I'll serve drinks. Just let me be in the room. I'll serve drinks or something like that. But
I'll be the bus boy. I can bust the tables.
Yeah, I'll be valet too. I would say the part of the hobby that really is most rewarding to me is the feedback that I get for the content that I produce, whether it's somebody who says that I made them laugh, or somebody that says that I showed them a card that they thought was cool and they started collecting it. I love getting that type of feedback. It drives me to continue to spend the time to make more content like this. But if I'm going to pick one instance, there's something that I'm always going to remember in my mind. I went to the Toronto Sports Card Expo last year. And it was my first time going to a show outside of the country. And it was just a really difficult show for me, the whole experience, because the travel from California to Toronto was difficult. The inventory that I had didn't do well at the show. And my camera went off, but I'm going to tell you guys the story anyways. You can hear me, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So the
this
show
is
was
actually better. I actually prefer this. If you're okay with it.
The show was very difficult for me, but I remember there's this little kid. His name's Mason. He walked up to my table, and he probably like 9, 10 years old. He walked up to the table, and he was starstruck seeing me. He could not believe that I was there, and he introduced himself to me. And he seemed like a little brother to me, so I instantly started to talk to him, and I talked to his mom, and he was just telling me how he watches my content and how he's primarily a hockey collector, being in Canada, but because of my content, he was interested in Star Wars, and he started watching the movies for the first time. Wow. But he told me he never had any cards. So I gave him some Star Wars cards, and I gave him cards that were not worth a lot of money, right, to you and me. But this kid like lit up. You thought I probably gave him like a 52 mantle, the way that he acted. And he was so happy that he was excited and jumping around and telling his mom that he was happy, that he came to visit me every single day of that like 4-day show, just hanging out with me, talking to me, telling me what Star Wars shows that he watched the night before. And then like to this day, like a year later, I still keep in contact with him. And I just hope that, I know that he's going to grow out of the hobby just like we all do as he gets older, goes to high school and things like that. But I hope that he'll retain that memory someday, and then that will bring him back to the hobby, and he'll be my age getting back into the hobby. And that will be the memory that he hangs on to. So that for me is probably the most rewarding part. And I look for those opportunities where I can really impact kids in the hobby, because I do think that they are the next generation, and that we do have to be mindful of them. We can talk about, profit and getting high-end cards and all this other stuff, but we really always have to be mindful about that entry level next generation of kids coming in. And that, to me, that's just something that I always remember.
Yeah. That's great. That sounds like a good memory, Dan. So I appreciate you sharing that. So before we wrap up, guys, any final words, any final thoughts? We're going on an hour, 45 minutes here. This is the marathon interview. Any final thoughts, any takeaways, anything that maybe we didn't cover that has been on your mind, all the above?
I think we did a thorough job today, Rob. Maybe part 2 down the road, but I think today we covered it well.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan?
I'll say, I really appreciate this conversation. I really appreciate you allowing us back on here and talking about these topics. Hey, I'm back, guys. I think as much as we want to try to ignore it, sometimes it's a good place to have a neutral forum like your show to do this and address some of these issues, because kind of going back to what I was saying before, I think a lot of people just don't consume our content. Personally, I don't think they actually know who we are, and they just kind of go off of these narratives that are being created out there. So I really appreciate you giving us your platform to allow us to address some of these things. And, I just want to say I appreciate what you do. I appreciate what Geoff does, and I appreciate what everybody in the hobby is doing when they're making content and trying to grow and entertain people in a positive way. So I think we should just keep it up and just keep our focus on that, and everything will take care of itself.
Yeah.
Well said, Daniel. I love that.
Yeah. And what I will say is you guys did not put up any kind of barriers. You guys didn't say anything was off limits. So that just made for a really good interview. I felt like I was able to ask you guys anything without you guys getting offended, pissed off, or clicking off. So and by all means, you guys are polarizing figures in the hobby. So I appreciate you guys taking this time out and coming on the show and making this a memorable roundtable for sure. So thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to everyone if you're watching on YouTube. I appreciate you. And don't forget, guys, take care of yourselves and your collection. Have a good one.